Okay, so in 9.5, we are going to look at kites and trapezoids and what each of their properties are. So right here, a kite is a quadrilateral with two distinct pairs of congruent consecutive sides. So you can see here in the picture that QR is congruent to RS, and then SP is congruent to PQ, okay? Two pairs of congruent consecutive sides, okay? They're right next to each other. All right, so okay, so on page 472, we have 4 theorems that we're going to talk about. First, if it's a kite, then the diagonals are perpendicular, and that you can see right here. Exactly one pair of opposite angles are congruent. And you need to take a second and make sure that you can tell that it is, I'm going to underline that in blue, and I'm going to start to see this angle and this angle are congruent. Then it says that one of the diagonals bisects the pair of non-congruent angles. So see, these are non-congruent angles. And if you can notice the two little dashes, that was bisected. Those two little angles are equal. This one has 3. So that big angle was bisected, and those two little ones are congruent. And then it says one diagonal bisects the other. So this is bisected. Each of those two halves are equal. All right, so turn the page. And on top of 473, it says, in this kite, and for some reason my top of this doesn't want to come in. All right, so that's B. It says that BAE is 32 degrees. BAE is 32 degrees. And then it says that BCE is 62. BCE is 62 degrees. And what do we know about that? We know that, and I'm just going to label some instead of doing these problems here. We know that this also has to be 32 degrees, don't we? Because it was bisected. And this has to be 62 degrees because that one was bisected, okay? We also know that these inside angles here are 90 degrees, don't we? Now at the bottom of this page, we start talking about trapezoids. And a trapezoid is a quadrilateral at least at one pair of parallel sides. And see, if we look down here, those two sides are parallel. And then it says the pair of parallel sides of the trapezoid are called the bases, okay? And it tells you that right there, the bases. And then an isosceles trapezoid is one in which the legs are congruent but not parallel, okay? So see the difference between the one, here you just have legs. Here you have congruent legs. That's the difference between the trapezoid and the isosceles trapezoid. And then at the next page, 474, there are 3 theorems for the isosceles trapezoid. And if it's an isosceles trapezoid, then each pair of base angles are congruent. which makes sense because the legs are congruent. Those angles are going to be congruent. And if it has congruous base angles, that's just saying it backwards. And it's an isosceles if and only if the diagonals are congruent. And I think then we need to turn to page 476. And we are going to do these problems. So, let's look down here at 8. In an isosceles trapezoid, use the same side interior angles postulate to find the measure of R, okay? So if this is an isosceles trapezoid, then we know that each pair of base angles must be congruent. And so you have to figure out what is the base angles. Well, here are the congruent sides, right? Which means that this angle must be congruent to that angle, okay? Those would be the base angles. So the measure of Q is 77. Now, same side interior angles postulate is talking about a transversal, right? So if you have two parallel lines, which we know this is parallel to this, and the same side interior angles, if it is cut by this trapezoid, okay, we know that they are equal to 180. Okay, so 180 minus 77 will give me 103. And so 103 would have to be here and also there. So the measure of angle R equals 103 degrees. And now if you turn the page, the trapezoid mid-segment theorem will be the last thing that we need to learn in here. Okay, and what it says is the mid-segment of a trapezoid is parallel to each base, and its length is 1/2 of the sum of the length of its bases. Okay, so what this right here is saying, XY is parallel to BC and AD, okay? Now, then it is saying if that's the case, then XY is equal to 1/2 of BC plus AD. So if we look down here, okay, it's telling us that this is parallel to these. And so I know that XY is going to be 1/2 times 12.5 plus 10.3. And that's all there is to that one. So I want you to try this one on the page, number 10 on 477, and come back and check your answer. Okay, so this one you had to actually find RS first, but it gave you this, PQ equals 2RS. So I know that PQ was 16.8, so I put that in there. Divide by 2, and I get 8.4 equals RS. And then I just did the formula, 1/2 times 16.8 plus 8.4, and it gives me 12.6. And that is all there is, and I will see you tomorrow.